Good afternoon. This is Elisa Loftus and Jimmy Ratliff, and today, last week we discussed becoming a consumer with dynamic independence, and we gave an overview of the intake process. So this week we're going to discuss creating an independent living plan, and we're going to talk about what they are, who creates them, and what purposes they serve. So, Jimmy, let's start with the most important, obvious question. What is an independent living plan?
Sure. So an independent living plan is a collaborative effort that is between a consumer and an independent living specialist or an IL specialist. And we do this at a Center for Independent Living, like here at Dynamic Independence. And this plan helps consumers identify their goals and the steps they need to take to achieve those goals.
Okay. And who is in charge of the independent living plan? Would it be the CIL or the consumer?
So a CIL, the Center for Independent Living here, it really is consumer driven. So consumers will identify and they'll set their own goals for their independent living plan. It's not a plan for the center, it's a plan for the consumer. So the center's role, or the IL specialist who's working for the center, their role is to discuss the consumer's goals with the consumer and help them to identify the priority of each of those goals and to finally assist in breaking down the actions that are needed to achieve those goals into small, attainable steps.
Okay. Who would be in charge of the ILP? Well, I've already asked that. Sorry, asked and answered. What are the steps to creating an ILP?
Okay, so steps to create an ILP, which is an independent living plan. So there's about 4 different steps to creating an ILP. And so last week we discussed that we have to go through the intake process. That's where we get things like your name and your birth date and all the general information you generally get when you're filling out any kind of intake form. That's all comes from the prospective consumer, and that will help us to determine eligibility of services, what services they might be able to receive from us. Through those discussions, we'll continue to talk to the consumer, and we'll discuss and identify both immediate and long-term needs. And the consumer will identify these needs, and an IL specialist might ask questions to clarify additional needs or different aspects of that need so they can help to better develop a plan.
Okay. So with multiple goals, even more action steps would be needed to take to work through that ILP. Who would be responsible for the action steps?
Well, let me step back for just a minute. I want to talk briefly about kind of finish up on the goals that we're looking at. So we talked about being able to figure out what the needs are. So once we identify those needs, then we create goals based upon those needs. And goals are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and they have a timeline that is based on what the consumer has provided you, that information the consumer's provided you. And it's very much driven by that consumer's needs and dreams and aspirations and what exactly they want. It's not our job as independent living specialists or as a Center for Independent Living to say, this is what you need and this is what you want. It's all very consumer driven. And then we develop those action steps and provide timelines there at that point.
So for example, if I'm wanting to save up for a car, I would set the steps of how much maybe I would take out of my paycheck per week, and how long it would take me to have X amount of dollars to either pay cash for a car, if that was the kind of car I was looking for, or if I was looking to buy a new car, what I would have to have for a down payment, for a monthly payment, what kind of credit score I would need to have, those kind of things. Those would all be part of the action steps that I would have to take.
Right, you would want to be able to identify those different aspects of it and set those into some action steps that were obtainable to meet that overall goal of buying a car or obtaining your license or whatever that might be. So, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so with the multiple goals, even more action steps are needed to work through the ILP. Who's responsible for taking those steps in each goal?
Okay, so it can be a combination of things. So generally a consumer, since it's driven by the consumer and it is their plan, they will be responsible for most of the action steps to obtain their goal. But there are some circumstances where maybe IL specialist or a third party might be required to provide one of those steps, to take an action on one of the steps in order to help that consumer meet that goal. So an example of that might be somebody wants to obtain employment. They want to work in the food industry, say. So they come in and they say, I want to create an independent living plan. My goal is to obtain employment in the food service industry. So one action step in that might be that an IL specialist would help a consumer as they fill out practice job applications or to develop a resume. So those might be things where they would work together, or where the IL staff would have to step in and maybe provide the practice applications to give them guidance on filling out those, or assist them in filling one or two of them out so they're more confident in those skills, and then work together to create resumes or other things like that. So it is a collaborative effort, but no matter who has that goal, or who has that action step that needs to be achieved, whoever that's assigned to, whether it's the consumer or whether it's an action step that needs to be taken by the center staff, that needs to be identified up front so that nobody's waiting on anybody else to complete a step. Everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing to help move the plan along.
With like deadlines. Now,
Yes.
does my deadline have to have, like, I mean, does it have to be like only I have like 30 days, or is there a specific set thing or is it just depending on what I feel comfortable with as a consumer?
As a consumer, it's really what you feel comfortable with. We do want to set realistic time frames. You don't want to say, I want to create a budget and then take 6 months to create a budget. You want to be able to have realistic time frames and things, but it is left up to the consumer on how quickly they would like to pursue these. Also, another thing that we like to talk about is priority, and we mentioned that a little bit earlier, but whenever we sit down and we discuss goals, identifying what's a priority and what needs to take place first. And you may have a goal that says, I want to get a driver's license, and you may have a goal that says, I want to create a budget, and I want to save another goal, I want to save money to get a car, and then I want to buy a car. So all those may be broken out into multiple steps that way. So, and each one of those goals could be met with their own set of action steps. And ultimately, you've gone through these 4 different goals that you've identified that you want to do, and you work through all the action steps, but they have to be in a certain order for you to make it to that ultimate goal of getting a vehicle and being able to drive it. So,
Okay. Good. Now, how is the progress tracked as a consumer completes their action steps or goals?
So the consumer's file documents all these processes and steps that have taken toward these goals. And it's generally the job of the IL specialist or the Center for Independent Living that they're working with to keep that record. Of course, consumers are welcome to have a copy of their record, anything that's in their file. We can provide that to them at their request. But as far as tracking information goes, the consumer should be aware of where they are in their plan, but we will keep an official file with their consumer record in it, and that will have any of this information that as they progress through their goals and they progress through their plan. And we will tend to gather that information from consumers as they progress through meetings and conversations with that consumer for follow-ups, or they may drop in and just report in, hey, I got 2 job offers today, and I'm going to discuss with the employer what the benefit would be to having those, and then make a decision, and they would come back and report the decision or something. So we have our jobs at an independent living center, or Center for Independent Living, misspoke there, but it is our jobs to keep that consumer record file up to date.
Okay. So as we conclude today's live, here are the key points to remember about an independent living plan. They help to set a course of action by clarifying a consumer's goals and develop a plan to achieve them. They help consumers stay focused, serving as a reminder of the consumer's goals and can help them to stay motivated and achieve them. They help consumer track their progress towards their goals and identify any challenges they are facing. Remember, an ILP can be important for individuals because it helps them maintain their independence and improve their quality of life. So for today's live, we want to wish you a great week. We hope that we have answered a few questions about what an independent living plan is and how it can help you. And if you are interested in coming in and becoming a consumer and maybe developing an independent living plan or any of our other services, please contact us at 918-335-1314 or just stop by 1110 Southeast Frank Phillips Boulevard here in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, and we are right across the street from Boulevard Pharmacy. Have a good afternoon and a great week.
All right, folks, we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us today.